Welcome to this week's Roundup. I am your host, Scarlett and with me today is Pieter Kleppe. And of course, we've got a lot to discuss. We're going to talk about Ursula von der Leyen, the upcoming election in France. But to start with, we first have to talk about Julian Assange being a free man after 14 years, fighting a legal battle. Pieter, he made a deal. Can you tell more about it?
Well, Julian Assange was a hacker in Australia. He was very successful, and he ended up becoming some kind of an activist journalist who managed to retrieve very secret information from the United States. Now, in 2010, I think it was, he released with WikiLeaks a massive amount of information about the United States, especially its foreign operations. Now, the US did not like that. There were things that he released that put the US in a bad light. For example, the fact that journalists had died in Iraq during the American occupation of Iraq. So that was very embarrassing for the US. And you could make a good case that it was very good of Assange to have leaked that. However, there are people who claim that as a result of Assange not being careful enough, not making some of the names of informants in Afghanistan specifically, not blacking them out, a few hundred people would have died. Frankly, I don't know what to think of it. I try to determine what is true, what is not true, and as far as I...
Right, because otherwise he could not get free. So what's the deal with his deal?
Well, the thing is that the important question, did he endanger people or not, is very difficult to answer that question. But even if he did, he has been hunted by the United States for 14 years, and he was in jail in the UK for I think 5 years. So the US, because they were afraid that he was going to win his court case in the US, which would have been very embarrassing under the US freedom of speech provisions, they said, look, we will condemn you to the number of years in jail that you have already served anyway. And if you agree with that, if you basically confess guilt, we release you on the spot. So
this is actually, for him a very good deal, but it's not a good thing for journalism. It's a black day for journalism. What is your take on that?
I do agree that there's some concerning things for journalists, but I don't think it's that simple. As I mentioned, the answer to that question is to determine the truth of how careless Julian Assange has been. Surely you would agree that if he willingly releases names of people that were helping the Americans against the Taliban terrorists, I mean, it's not very moral to bring these people's life into danger, right? Now, Assange denies that. If he's right, then, of course, it is, like you say, a black day for journalism. And very unfortunate to have the United States, the beacon of liberty, engaging in this kind of behavior. But it wouldn't be the first time, because if you look at the history of U.S. foreign operations and the violations of human rights all the way through to the Cambodia and Vietnam wars, then sadly, it's not the first time that the US acted immorally.
Okay, let's go to the second topic, because there's no roundup without talking about Ursula von der Leyen. And in this week's episode of Ursula von der Leyen, we are talking about the fact that the top EU positions have been as good already decided. It's going to be von der Leyen, Costa, and Callas. First of all, I think what was interesting is that Meloni, one of the biggest winners of the EU elections, she won elections in her country. The ECR is now the third biggest party within the parliament. She was not happy with the negotiations. She was not even invited on Tuesday's negotiations. Did they even take into consideration the opinions of European voters while giving out these EU positions?
I think they don't. I think they just ignored the success of the right in the European Parliament elections. They basically decided to, the centrist parties decided to distribute all the top jobs amongst themselves. And the most annoying thing is that, a fake center-right politician like Ursula von der Leyen, a left-green politician, will be reappointed. But there's more than that. Also, this week it turned out that sort of the EU member states, their draft program for the next 5 years, to a degree they abandon the plan to scrap some of the Green Deal legislation, which I think is also very unfortunate. If you see how badly the Greens have been hammered almost in the whole of Europe, you would expect our governments to take this into account, but they do not.
This week, of course, there's going to be elections in France. The first round is going to take place, and as expected, there's a fear of the rise of the far right. As a result, this week, the French government actually deepened their military ties, with both Poland and Germany. They knew that this would probably not happen with a new government. It's basically exactly what happened in my country, the Netherlands, right before the elections, because with the majority of these new elections, it will not take place. Can you tell more about it?
Yeah, everybody's looking at France. Ursula von der Leyen is in a way even a sideshow. The question is, will the right-wing party, the Rassemblement National, will they have a majority of seats or not? And it's very difficult to predict because there's 2 rounds, and in between the 2 rounds, political parties make all kinds of deals. Now, there is a very imperfect projection, very unreliable projection, which predicts that they will not have a majority, even if some allies of them will do well. However, if you look at this result, I think there are 2 possible outcomes. The first one is that Jordan Bardella, who is the candidate prime minister of Le Pen's party Rassemblement National, will enter a minority government propped up by the center-right, Les Républicains. That's option number 1. A second option, and maybe some French will declare I'm crazy now, but I would not exclude it, is that the party of Emmanuel Macron will decide to support the minority government of Jordan Bardella. Why? Because in this way they would manage to further moderate the Rassemblement National. That would be a win for Macron. And secondly, Macron would actually be able to do something in the next 3 remaining years of his presidency, because otherwise he's going to be a lame duck, because the French president can only basically decide foreign policy. And a lot of the important policies would otherwise be implemented by Bardella and the party of Le Pen. So in this way, Macron would still have control over policy. But I mean, this is, I must admit, very speculative. What we know is that if there is a hung parliament, if nobody has a majority, the French constitution has no answer. It may be complete gridlock. So that's why I think we should not exclude that in the end Macron would make that move.
That's very interesting. And to reflect on decisions that he's making now out of fear that he will not have a majority anymore in parliament, what I think is that we're basically saying is that this elite is just doing whatever they want to do without taking into consideration the vote of their country. What is your take on that?
Well, let's maybe see if there's going to be a change in that. Some people speak of France's Brexit moment. Difficult to say, you know. Personally, I think, as we say in French, plus ça change, you know, big changes or things that look like big changes often in the end turn out to not have signified so much change. And if you look at the Rassemblement National, a lot of their policies are being moderated. They decided that France will not pull out of the military command of NATO. Also, France will not pull out of the EU electricity market. And you know, interestingly, there was a debate between Bardella and then the Prime Minister of Macron, and it turned out that some of the aspects of the pension reform of Le Pen's party were actually more right-wing economically, were a bit more tougher on pensioners than Macron. So we should not assume all that much. And you know, my money is on a fudge on business as usual.
Thank you very much, Peter. And thank you for our viewers for watching this week's Roundup.